Well, it is straight up 10 o'clock. If you don't mind, I think we'll get started to make sure that we utilize everybody's time. Good morning. I'm Brett Augustine. I'm a recovery business advisor for North Central Texas Small Business Development Centers, which is a leading provider for assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, which allows us to offer services at no cost to you. Today we have how to win at social media with a new presenter for us, but she's amazing. You're going to love Melissa. And before I introduce Melissa, I want to just have a couple of quick notes. If you would please, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them as she requests them or at the end of her presentation so that we can get everybody's questions answered if you have any. And if you have any other things afterwards, we'll talk about some of the other things coming up, including more from her. So without further ado, for those of you that don't know Melissa Forciat, allow me to let you know Melissa's a Southern California-based marketer, speaker, consultant, and author. She teaches small businesses how to market on a budget and helps them to execute their marketing strategies, as well as in addition to working with business organizations to train their trainers. She offers keynotes, presentations, workshops, and webinars. And her national and international speaking schedule has taken her as far as New Zealand, which we were talking about earlier, for those of you that might have been here. She says it's a beautiful country and we should all probably attend. To date, she has delivered over 120 workshops and webinars to thousands of attendees. Before starting Melissa Forciat's events and marketing, her career involved roles with the Olympic Winter Games, Rugby World Cup, and the Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee. Melissa is an author of the free ebook, Small Business Marketing on a Budget. And with that, I'd like to give you Miss Melissa Forciat.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just going to take one quick second to make sure that my screen shares here so that we can see the presentation. All right. So first of all, a huge thank you to everybody at the North Central Texas SBDC. There's been a whole team of people to work with to put this on for you today. And, a huge thank you to Lori and Judy and Brett and Paul and everybody really. For me, it's so valuable to be able to bring material like this to small business owners. So to be able to partner with the North Central Texas SBDC to bring this to you is a big deal to me. This is the first webinar in a series of 3 webinars, and we're going to have a leaning towards talking about how to build your holiday marketing strategy. But these topics are, to me, they're all relevant all across the year. So you'll get a little bit of both of those perspectives. We'll be thinking about how this builds into your holiday campaigns, but also how you use tools like this year round to make sure that your marketing is going as smoothly as possible and that you're reaching as many people as you can with it. So a little bit more about my background. Obviously, Brett did a great job sharing a bit of my bio, but to give you some context on how that matters for a presentation like this. So I started out in my career doing major international sport events. I worked Olympic Winter Games and Rugby World Cup and with the U.S. Olympic Committee, like Brett said. And so, these are huge brands. I mean, some of the biggest brands in the world. Almost everybody's heard of them. They're trying to execute things that are going to require millions of people to be on the other side of it in order for it to be a worthwhile endeavor for them. So, to be able to see marketing and press at that scale early in my career was very informative because I got a chance to see how they do what they do, how they nurture different target markets, how they really build a message over time. All of that was very helpful to see. But then I started my own business almost 9 years ago now. And, when I started Melissa Forciat Events and Marketing, I myself was a micro business owner, like I'm sure many of you are. And I was working primarily with micro business owners. So I had to figure out, how do I take all these great marketing lessons and make them work for businesses that look like mine, that don't have the resources? Maybe you don't have any budget for marketing. Maybe you don't have thousands of people on your team like an Olympic Games would have, but you still have to figure out how to make it work. How do you get your message to your audience? And I think this is a really interesting presentation to look at from that point of view, because there's so much of an emphasis on advertising when it comes to some social media platforms, but you can really look at it from an organic standpoint as well. And that is what we will be doing today. We're going to talk about good strategies and community building on social media to help you build your audience and to help you build your message. And then potentially down the road, if you want to do advertising on top of that, you have the option to, but that's not assumed for this particular presentation. Now, having said all that, a few quick housekeeping items that I wanted to mention before we dive in. First of all, we encourage everybody to stay on mute, but I do want you to minimize distractions on your end, because ultimately with this presentation and really any presentation that I give, I've got a lot of content that I'm throwing at you, and I think you're going to get more from it if you're able to think about your business during the material and through the material. So, if there's a distraction on your end that you are able to minimize right now, go ahead and do that. If that's silencing your phone, if that's shutting off a messaging device, there's something that you can quiet, this is a good time to do it. Now, in terms of the material itself, like I said, I've got a lot of material I'm going to be sending your way here. So the slide deck has a lot of slides in it, and there's additional resources that I've compiled from courses that I've created or blogs that I've written in the past. And I've pulled the best of the best and I've put it all into a landing page on my website that I've created. So there's going to be a link for that at the very end. And I'm going to make sure also to send that out to the SBDC to send to you afterwards as well. So if you feel like you're really rushing to take notes, maybe take a deep breath and sit back for a second, because you'll be getting a lot of this material again later so that you can investigate it a little closer. And then lastly, in terms of questions, so I will save, all three of the presentations actually in this series will work a little differently. This one today, I want you to focus on questions at the end. So if you have questions as we go through, make a note of them, but I'm going to address them at the end of the session. There will be some times that I ask you questions as we go along, because I'd like you to be able to start thinking about how this material works with your business. So if you're on with me live, great, go ahead and answer them in the chat if you'd like. And if you're not on with me live, if you're listening to a recording of this back, then go ahead and think about those questions before you move on in the material, because it'll be useful for you to sort of get a sense of place before the material builds. So build with it with your business. Okay, so having said all of that, now I want to start setting up what this material is. Like I said, we're going to be leaning into the holidays in this series, including in this presentation. Social media marketing is something that you can do year round, and I want to also put that context into this presentation too, because we're not just looking to do a campaign and then be done with marketing for the rest of the year and never talk to our audience again. So I want to show you both the forest and the trees here. We're looking to see, how would you utilize social media for a holiday campaign? And then how would you use it beyond that? How would you use it to build an audience you can talk with all the time, year round? So here's a big thing that I want you to understand. Here's how not to use social media. I am a huge believer that social media requires a little finesse. The people who have a little finesse with social media tend to do better on social media than the ones who are just hitting their audience really hard with sales messages all the time. So I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Feel free to comment in the chat if you have had that experience of seeing a business, or maybe this is your own business that does this, where every single post is a sales message. There's always something being sold, a discount on something, a special deal on something, a picture and a price tag, and it's just one message like that after another. That can be really hard to sustain that kind of message. Yeah, Brett's saying too many do that for sure. I know I've seen it. It's hard to sustain that as an audience member. And so, it tends to be difficult to create a conversation with your audience when all you're doing is selling all the time, which I know is a little counterintuitive. So we'll talk about this as we go through, but as I'm setting this up, I just want you to be clear that we're not going to be talking about trying to sell all the time on social media. We're going to talk about the finessing. We're going to talk about the long-term strategy of social media. And, if you're willing to be patient and if you're willing to build relationships on social media, you're probably going to get a lot more from it. So we'll talk about techniques for doing that as we go through today. I just wanted you to be aware before we get started that that's the approach I'm going to take here. And so to do that, here's how we'll talk about it. First, we're going to spend a little time talking about why are you social media marketing? What's the purpose you're trying to achieve? Because there can be several different specific purposes that you're trying to achieve. So how are you, really weaving that into your social media strategy? Then we're going to talk about how you match that purpose that you've picked with your target markets. And you might have different ones on each social media platform that you use if you're on more than one. So we'll talk about that so that you can get an idea of how you might use it differently for different audiences. And then we're going to dial into two of the objectives we covered in the first section. We're going to go further into showcasing your brand and then creating conversation. And hopefully between all of those things, it gives you a more well-rounded look at what to tackle for social media marketing. Okay, having said all that, that's what we are talking about today, but here's what we're not talking about today. And I wanted to be very upfront with this because if you've logged in just to hear about these things, you're going to walk away not having heard about them. So we are not talking about paid advertising and its many different wonderful terms today. Things like lookalike audiences and boosting and retargeting and pixels and geo-targeting and pay-per-click and ad budgets. Look, all of that's great. That's all great, but it's not a social media strategy by itself. It's an advertising strategy that you can layer onto a social media marketing strategy. So I like to say that tools like that can expedite the reach of an already good social media marketing plan, but they are not a replacement for a good social media marketing plan. Because if you don't have a good marketing plan in place, I'm a believer that you're going to end up wasting a lot of the money that you're spending on your advertising by losing all the contacts that you made when you advertised to get them. So a visual that I like to have for this, a metaphor, if you will. Imagine you were really thirsty and you wanted to drink water. Would you pour the water into a glass or a sieve to drink out of? So if you're pouring water into that sieve, there's holes in the side, the water just keeps falling out the sides of this sieve. You keep trying to collect enough to drink, but it keeps spilling out the sides because the holes are still there. And it's going to be really frustrating trying to drink water and quench your thirst. Whereas if you poured the water into a glass or into a cup that doesn't have holes in it, you just, fill the glass up with water and you drink it. And ultimately, to me, it's the same thing with your marketing plan. If you've got a really solid marketing plan with no holes in it and you pour leads in because you spent time or money to reach them, if you've got a good marketing plan, they're not going to spill out the sides. You're not going to ignore them. You're not going to drop them. You're going to end up being able to keep a conversation going with them and continue to remarket to them over time. If, however, you're, spending the money or the time to put those more leads into your marketing plan, but you don't have a solid marketing plan in place, you don't have a way of really maintaining connection with everybody, you end up dropping those leads over time, you end up ignoring some of them, and you don't even know when or where the conversation stopped. And at the end of the day, you end up wasting a little bit of that money that you spent because they're not in touch with you anymore. So, we want to prevent that. So today we're talking about plugging up the holes, how to get that really tight, solid marketing plan in place before you start trying to get as many leads as possible into it so that when you do, you're going to get more out of it. As we get to the very end of this presentation, I'll give you a couple of slides to show you in a maybe more tangible way what I mean by this and how much of a difference it makes if you have a way of continuing to stay connected with your audience. But I did want to say all this up front for you because if this is why you came to the presentation today, we're going to talk about organic marketing on social media today. So if all of this sounds good to you, you're in the right place. Let's go ahead and let's talk about how to win at social media. How to win at social media even with no budget. All right, first things first. Let's talk about why are you social media marketing? We want to really nail down the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, and hopefully that purpose is infusing into everything that you say, everything that you post, everything that you comment, just the way that you're showing up on social media, ideally is fueled by knowing why you're there to begin with. So first of all, knowing that we're also talking about this in terms of a holiday sales standpoint, we will be talking about the campaign idea of it all, but I want you to consider the fact that having a short-term holiday sales campaign or, short-term, products that you're trying to sell, or services that you're trying to sell, or, a themed campaign that you're trying to do. That's great, but it's going to ultimately perform better over time within a longer term plan, right? If all you've got is the short-term holiday sales campaign plan, and then you execute that, and then you've got nothing to back it up afterwards, then every single year you're going to be starting from zero. You're going to be starting from no momentum and trying to build all the momentum. So I want you to consider, in everything that I talk about today, we're going to be thinking about how do you use this in the short term, in this next month or two, as we lead into the holidays, but also how do you use it long term beyond that? How do you stay consistent with your marketing over time? Even though you're not doing a sales campaign around the holidays anymore, how are you continuing to use these techniques in a way that really bridges that gap and doesn't leave you ignoring audience members or ignoring your social media after the campaign is over? So, that's something to consider with every single thing that we talk about. But when it comes to the purposes that you could be trying to achieve with social media marketing, there are 5 different objectives that we're going to talk about today. Here's the first one. The first one is building your brand. Now, this is actually, to me, a really interesting feature of social media, and something that really anybody can take advantage of, because, it wasn't that long, it was some time ago, but it wasn't that long ago that if you really wanted to get the story out about your business, there was a time that you didn't have as many options to do that. If we go back quite some years, you were really looking for a feature from an earned media outlet, so from a third party media outlet, like a newspaper or radio ad, or maybe a TV feature, or maybe a magazine feature. Those were great opportunities for businesses when they got them, right? There were very limited opportunities to get that, but if you got featured in one of those things, all the eyes were there. So it was a huge boon to your business, and it could make your business to get featured in the right place at the right time. But those opportunities were hard to come by, because a lot of businesses were clamoring for opportunities like that. And so they were rare. They were rare to get. It was hard to get them. And the other thing I will say about those opportunities, in terms of that model, was that although you could control what you said, let's say in an interview, you couldn't control the edit. You couldn't control the final product. Your message of your business has filtered through somebody else's story angle. So that, was the model that we had at one point. But we've moved past that model into this new model where you can put your story out there and you can control your own message. And you can do that for free on a platform like any social media platform, for example. So, you get to decide how you want to tell the story of your brand, what you want to say about it, how you want to hook in your audience. You get to control the narrative. You get to control the flow of information. Of course, we have flipped this model, right? So you can control it, but it's harder to get people there, because everybody can do this. So every tool that you would use to communicate your message is more saturated, perhaps, than it used to be. You go to social media, how many millions of accounts are there out there? And, you're competing with that to get in front of your audience. So, we've flipped this model, but the advantage still remains that if you can get somebody to one of your accounts, can you get them to feel like they understand you, that they've gotten to know your business, that they've gotten to trust your business in the process of looking through the content that you have curated for them? So, yes, it's harder to get people there, but when you get people there, you control that narrative. So what do you want to say about your business? So this is one of the objectives you can be considering when you think about your social media marketing plan. Now, here's a second one: building your reputation. This is a surprisingly important one. And I'm going to say this because a lot of business owners that I talk to feel very uncomfortable tooting their own horn. They want to be humble, but here's the problem: your audience needs to know you're good at what you do. They need to know that your products and services are worthwhile, that you have expertise in your area. Whatever it is you're trying to sell, you probably have competitors. So they need to know that spending time on your social media platforms, buying your products and services, that's going to be worthwhile Something that's been really interesting for me in my own business over the past several years is I've started to look more at the psychology of marketing and sales. And I've learned, and we won't dig into this too much today, but I've learned that there are, 4 different personality types in the buying process. And although they all need something a little different from you, they all need some kind of validation before they make their purchase. They need to know that what they're purchasing is going to be good for them. And we're all using different types of criteria and information to evaluate a business. But at the end of the day, anything that you can do to represent the strength of your business will help somebody in your audience to make the choice to work with you over time. So the great thing about social media marketing is that there are a lot of ways to show the strength of your reputation. Part of it is numerical, and we can all see it, right? You can see on most accounts, you can see followers, you can see if people are engaging with somebody else's business account. Those are things that we can see. But what you post also can lean into this. Can you talk about accomplishments that you've had? Can you talk about things that you've done? Can you talk about, can you just start throwing in terms like, when I work with clients, or, like, what, can you just start throwing in information that starts to validate your business? And if you're wanting to do that in a humble way, there are lots of ways to do that. You can thank your audience for being part of that journey. But this does become something that influences your audience in a different kind of way. And we get to control how we share the information about our reputation. Now, a third objective that you could potentially have is creating community. And this does have a link to some degree with building reputation, because inherently, if your community is strong, if it appears to be strong, it suggests to us psychologically that your business has a strong reputation, right? And even if that's not necessarily a thing that we should link, we tend to link it anyway. For example, if you're choosing between 2 restaurants for dinner and you see one restaurant with a line around the block and you see another restaurant that has 0 people in it, which one would you think has the better food? But why would you think it has better food? It's like, we don't really know how the food tastes just because there's more people at one restaurant than the other. But yet we think we do. We think there must be a reason why so many people are flocking to this business. So creating community can influence how people look at your reputation, but creating community is a thing unto itself on social media as well. You can be proactive in targeting the people that you want to start bringing into your community, and you can start communicating with them. You can have conversations with them to bring them into the community. So this is something that you can stoke. You can also create conversations more easily within your community if you want to, if you've really thought that through in an appropriate way. So, these are all different things that you can control within your social media strategy, and you can start building towards them if you think about how you want to do it. Now, a fourth goal you could potentially have is generating leads. And I want to tell you that I believe this goal is a byproduct of doing the first 3 things well, and then giving people an avenue to communicate with you one-to-one. So if you've built your brand, your reputation, and your community, and then you give people a means of connecting with you directly, you've now got a lead that you can follow up with one-to-one and maintain that conversation through their sales. So that's something that we can potentially aim for. And like I said, you're probably going to get more from this if you're doing at least one of those first 3 things pretty well. And this, of course, brings us to number 5, generating sales. Now, I believe generating sales is a byproduct of doing the first 4 things well on social media. So if you've built that brand, the reputation, and the community, and then you've created a way for somebody to get out of the anonymous, faceless mass of your audience and into a one-to-one conversation with you so that you can start meeting their needs, addressing their objections. Well, now they're in your sales pipeline. You could generate a sale from that. For some people, for some businesses, they'll go through this process very quickly. For some, like my business, it'll take a lot longer. And, just knowing where your business might fall in that urgency scale can be helpful when you start to build your plan. But I do want to emphasize, for those of you who were only going to social media because you wanted to achieve goal number 5, that's where you start seeing that approach of doing nothing but sales posts. And that becomes really challenging for your audience because they came to social media to be social. They came there for other reasons. They didn't come there with a credit card in their hand ready to buy things most of the time, right? So in order for us to be effective as marketers on social media, we have to lean into why they were there to begin with so that we can get their attention so that we can generate the sale when they're good and ready. And, I understand that if you're marketing on social media, I get it. You're trying to have people buy things from your business. You're there because you want people to buy your products and services. That's why you are marketing on social media. On social media. And yet you have to be able to sort of mask it and their objectives and why they were on social media in order to get their attention to generate the sale. So this can be a frustrating thing for some business owners. It's where you go from, being really aggressive with sales to realizing, oh, this isn't working and I need to do something else. And that's when we tend to transition to a more long-term plan that really focuses on building conversation within our community and building awareness of our brand first so that we can get people to be interested in buying our stuff. So having said all of that, I want to start thinking about how the holidays weave in. So here's a question that I want to pose to you. If there's anybody here with me on live who wants to answer this question, feel free to type your answer into the chat so that everyone can see your answer. But are you familiar with the idea of the on-ramp to a campaign or to a launch? So again, if you're on with me live, you can put your answer in the chat. If you're not, just take a moment to think about this. Process, in your memory bank. Have you heard about this idea before? When you think about having a campaign or a launch, have you thought about it as having an on-ramp to it? Is this a term that you've heard? For some industries, this is something that you talk about, that this is an idea that people express. For other industries, this is maybe a new thing to consider. So just take a moment to think if that's something that you've heard of. And I'll give you a little bit of background on this because this is something that we'll be thinking about not only in how you approach your holiday campaigns, but also this is the bridge between your holiday campaign and all your other marketing. This idea of the on-ramp is one where if you were going to drive on the highway, you're probably not going to get onto the highway, from going, 15 miles per hour to full speed right away. You're going to need a little bit of a ramp to get you there to build that speed so that you're able to drive at full speed by the time you actually enter the highway itself. And so it's the same thing with a campaign. If you're looking to launch a holiday marketing campaign, for example, and you have a date in mind when you're going to do that, and you went from not talking about it at all to all of a sudden you've got a campaign, you don't have an audience there with you ready to receive your message quite yet. You haven't built them into it, you haven't gotten them excited about it, they haven't been looking for it. So a lot of them are probably going to miss your launch as a result. But if you really want to get a more effective launch date or of any campaign, you're going to start messaging it beforehand. You're going to start communicating about it, getting people excited about it, sharing what you're excited about, teasing them about what's coming. So this is the kind of thing to bear in mind. And this is what really leans into some of those objectives we talked about. If you're building, brand, for example, if you're building your community around your brand, that can help you start to think about, how am I going to talk about the campaign before it launches so that when it launches, people are ready to go and people are ready to be there with me. And this is something that you can really think about so that it's not all just, here's the day the sale starts, let's go. It actually leaned into social media before the day of the sale. So I want you to think of your holiday campaign as part of your bigger strategy overall, and it starts now. If anything, some of you may have already started your holiday marketing at this point. But start thinking about how you're going to build into that message in the month ahead so that, you're not just hitting people really hard with a sales message right as you're ready to launch. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the purpose, but now let's talk about how that matches up with the target market. A lot of people ask me, where should I be on social media? How should I be using social media? And this is where we start asking ourselves some questions so that we can lean into it. Now, I know that I'm going to talk about the term target market quite a lot here. So let me give you all a working definition of that so that we know what we're talking about. Your target markets would be the people most likely to be interested in your product, your service, your program, your idea. Whatever it is you're selling, these are the people who would be most likely to buy it. And these are ultimately the people that you want to reach on social media. And that's actually kind of a tricky thing to consider because we're attracted ourselves as marketers to social media because we're under the impression that we have access to millions of people, right? There are millions of people on this platform. Great. There can be millions of people on the platform, but that really doesn't matter. The only people that matter are your target market. So, how many people are in your target market? Where are they congregating within that social media platform? And is that a good way for you to get in front of them? Because at the end of the day, if those are the only people that are going to buy your product or service, the rest of the people that you were potentially going to communicate with aren't really an efficient use of your marketing resources to be working really hard to reach them. So we want to get in front of our target markets and really locate where they are on social media and talk to them directly in a way that feels relevant to them so that we can get more out of our marketing and they can get more out of our message. So the question becomes, which target markets are actually aligned with your social media strategy? If you've identified that, it might actually change how you talk on that platform that you're on, or you might end up talking differently to people on different platforms as a result. You know, I can tell you, for example, I'm on a few different social media platforms and I use them in different ways. I'm communicating with different people usually, and I'm thinking about that and who I engage with and what I'm putting out there. So this is something that you can consider as well. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples just to start showing you how it changes things if you've got a different purpose and you've got a different target market and how all that can turn into your social media strategy. So I'm going to give an example that's business to business and business to consumer so that we can get a couple different working ideas of how this would all hang together. So the first example that I want to give you is a business to consumer, direct to consumer sort of approach, attracting parents who want holiday photos of their families. So let's say you've got a photography business and you wanted to attract parents who are going to get family photos for the holidays. Well, how would that relate to those first four objectives that we talked about? From a brand standpoint, you know, it's not really about you, is it? This is about you showing how you're going to be about them. So you really want to make your brand look like, oh, we can work with this. This fits with our family vibe. We want to have this experience with this photographer for this day. They're really gonna want to see. I mean, ultimately, they're putting their family in front of you as a photographer, right? So they're going to want to make sure that the experience that they're going to have lines up with the experience that they wanted to have, and that the end product is going to showcase their family in a way that highlights it in a way they'll be proud of. So, you know, your brand is about really showing how you're going to showcase them, how you're going to give them that experience, and making that align with what they actually wanted from you to begin with. Now, from a reputation standpoint, they want good photos, right? They're going to want to know that they're going to get a good product here. So, you know, how can you show them that? Well, you're probably, for example, going to show them examples of other photos that you've done. But there may be other ways that you can talk about the reputation and that you can show that, you know, you could talk about how many clients you've had, or there are families that come back to you every single year to get their photos done. And it just starts to lend into this idea that you've got a really good quality product. Now, building community, again, it does, you know, having a strong reputation is something that can be we influence our understanding of your reputation by knowing that you have a strong community. So that is a place where it links, but community also stands onto itself. So, you know, if you've got other families that you've taken photos for, show the range of families that you've worked with, show the strength of your community. If there are other suppliers that you work with, other businesses that you work with to stage your photos, show that, you know, show that you've got a network around you, both from the families and from the businesses around you and the venues that you work with. There's so many ways to show the strength of your community. And in addition to that, you can potentially go out into social media and find places where parents of families are engaging and just be there having a conversation with them as your business. And eventually some of them will start coming back and checking out your photos. So this is all, building, yes, from the idea of reputation, but now building into this idea that you can generate your community proactively. Now, from all of this, can you generate those leads? Can you get them to sign up for something? Can you get them in on a special holiday deal? Can you get them in, is there any way that you can get them into, downloading something for free to help them be ready for their next photography session, and then continue having a conversation with them by email until they want to actually work with you as opposed to any other photographer. So these are things that you can do to start getting into that one-to-one conversation where you originally went to social media just to talk with all the families and all the parents, but now you're having a conversation with this one person who could buy a session with you. So that would be a way to consider this for this business to consumer example. I mean, you think about what would be right for a business like this, where would you be on social media? Well, you're going to want to be places where you can showcase the images. You're going to want to be places where you can put the pictures at the front and center of your business. So you're going to look for platforms that let you do that more often than not. Maybe things like Instagram or Pinterest. Maybe you'll be on Facebook. Where are the parents going to be that you're going to sell to? So you look within platforms like that and you start thinking, where specifically can I talk to you? So there are quite a lot of platforms out there, and you get to make decisions about where you're reaching your audience most effectively. Let's look at a different example just to show you how this would change things. So what if you were trying to attract human resources directors of local companies for employee gifts? This is a very different example. This one's business to business. So you're reaching out as a business owner to an employee of this business, a human resources director, with something for their business, employee gifts. So this changes a lot of context. Let's look at this from the standpoint of those first four goals again. From a brand standpoint, the human resources director is representing a company that has its own specific value set and its own specific processes and way of doing business. So of the many suppliers they could potentially choose to get their holiday gifts, they're going to want to know that they choose somebody who's got this brand alignment, who will have a similar value system, who will be able to work with their process. These are things that are fixed for them, and they want to make sure that they've found a supplier who's going to mesh well with what already is happening in their business. Now, from there, reputation is going to be pretty important for this human resources director, because even if they are the sole decision maker, which a lot of times you're going to get to more than one person who's part of a decision making process in a bigger company, they still may need to show a reason why they made this choice for backup to cover themselves for later, right? So they're going to be looking for affirmation that this is why we chose this supplier, right? And if you can help arm them with that, you're going to be giving them a great favor in the process, right? So if you can show them stats, if you can show them accolades that you've achieved, if you can show the quality of your product or service in some way that's going to really be meaningful to them in their evaluation, that is part of what's going to turn their head on social media. Now, community, again, the strength of your community does suggest a strength of reputation, but it can stand unto itself, right? If you're able to show, oh, we've worked with all these other companies on their holiday gifts, it starts to give them a sense of who else trusts you, who else does business with you. Do we want to, does that mean something to us? But also, in some cases, for some suppliers, if your company has a connection with these other businesses and they wanted to have a connection with those businesses, their relationship with you puts them a degree of connection closer. And so maybe they choose your company for that reason in some cases. So these are things that you can start communicating to them, even just in your content and the way that you're communicating. Now, how do you generate leads in this audience? Where could you actually get directly in front of this type of contact? What platforms are they allowed to be on during the day, during the business day at their office? Are there restrictions on on what their activities are and what they're allowed to be doing? So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is, what platforms are you using? And if you're engaging with the company, are you actually in any way talking to this particular contact? Probably not. For a lot of platforms, like let's say you engage with the company's Twitter, or you engage with the company's Facebook page or their YouTube account, you're probably engaging with somebody on the other end who's a social media manager for that company, not the human resources director. And the chances that your message is going to bridge that gap are very slim. So where can you get in front of the human resources directors directly? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they in certain groups? Are they following certain hashtags on a particular platform? Where can you get directly into a conversation that only they are having and engage with them there so that you can build that one-to-one connection? So it starts to change how you would use social media, right? You're going to probably be looking at things more like LinkedIn there, or other professional networking types of applications. If you're going to see them on something else that's not a professional application, or is there a specific group of human resources directors congregating in one place having a conversation? So these are all things to consider. Obviously these are two very specific examples. Chances are I haven't hit on everybody's business who's listening in just by looking at these two examples, but you can already see how different the approaches would be on each of them. Now, just as we get into the holidays, what are some other ideas that you could use to tap into a corporate audience for the holidays? Because I know that I've already showed you that the human resources market might be a little bit more nuanced in how you would reach them. So some things to consider, because I'm a big believer that social media is part of a bigger strategy. It doesn't have to be the only strategy to itself. So this is where you can start incorporating other marketing activities to enhance the message that you're putting out on social media. It could be that you do a year in review email. You get their email address and you send them a year in review email. It could be that you do holiday cards or gifts, depending on what your bottom line is. It could be that you do an end of the year thank you in some way, shape, or form. So these are things that you can do to really start leveraging that. Now, a question I would have for you, if you're on with me live, feel free to answer this question in the chat directly. But for those of you, whether you're on with me live or not, take a moment to just think about this. Do you have a service or product-based business? Because chances are, as I've been giving examples, you've been imagining that I've been talking about the other one. So, just understand that everything that I'm talking about here applies to all types of businesses. It's just about finding where your audience is and making sure you get directly in front of them. So do you have a service-based business where you're offering services, even if you have them packaged in certain ways, you're providing a service, versus a product business where you may be more likely to be in production mode and warehousing and all those other things that go along the lines of product-based businesses during holiday seasons that get a little busier. I have also found that service versus product-based businesses, you might find that the holidays are your busiest time or your not busiest time. So depending on what type of business you have, you might leverage this time of year in a slightly different way. So think about that for a moment. And if your answer is service-based business, I wanted to make sure you have some options here as well that you can consider. So when it comes to the holidays, it may be a slightly more obvious thing for businesses that have gift type offerings. This can be a huge busy time of year. It could be the busiest time of year for your business. For a service-based business such as mine, you might see that you have a slowdown that's happening during a time like this. And so there's a different way that you can leverage the holidays if that's the case for your business, right? You could be using this time to link with other businesses that have potential tie-in offers and start creating a plan for how you'll work with each other in the year ahead or during this time. It could be that you do have a one-time offer in the lead up to the holidays where people can try out your services, or they can, get an opportunity to use your services once. Maybe that could be as a gift. You could have potentially a discount on monthly packages for the new year to give as gifts for, other people who want to buy your services. It could also be that you're planning right now on the lead up to a New Year's resolution type of offer, because once the new year hits, we see a ton of that. So maybe what you're really gearing up for is for people to pay attention to you on January 2nd, and you're building into that during this time and hoping that they'll be ready for your message when you're ready to send it. Again, this is that campaign on-ramp idea. that you want to leverage. You don't just want to hit them hard on January 2nd. You want to get them excited about it beforehand. So having said all that, let's talk a little bit. I want to dive in a little bit deeper to two of the objectives that we talked about. The first one being the part about your brand. So let's talk about showcasing your brand, because this is something that we've talked about a little bit already. This idea that you're just going to go to social media and sell, sell, sell tends to drive people away. And that's not good for us as marketers, because most social media platforms are driven by engagement. They've got algorithms that are, there's so much content going out, and they're trying to decide what do people really need to see of all this content. So they're going to look for content that appears to be popular, that appears to be relevant, that appears that people are talking about it. So if you've got stuff that you're putting out that people are walking away from because they feel, imposed on, or they feel like they're not ready to buy what you're selling, but that's all you're trying to do with them, then you're actually leaning away from the engagement that drives social media reach on most platforms. So we want to instead really think about how we're engaging with people with our content. And this is an idea that I would call selling without selling that I want to share with you now. And this is something that you could potentially take off of social media too. This idea of selling without selling, I think, works in many different marketing channels. It could work maybe even in networking, for example. But how can you sell the idea of your business without actually selling anything, and in doing so get people thinking about your business so they want to buy something? I know this is really counterintuitive. I know it's like next level 3D chess. It seems so silly. It's like the movie Inception. There are just layers here on layers. And yet, if we're leaning in this way, we're much more likely to create a conversation that's going to create the reach we want. So what types of things can we talk about in our business that'll get people engaging with our business first? Well, here are some ideas, right? Concepts, values, philosophies, stories, senses, emotions. There may be more than this, but here are, 6 different buckets of things that you could potentially be talking about to start roping in your audience into conversations that will hopefully help them start to do the marketing work on their own. And I wanted to give you some examples for this, just to give you a way to start getting a fold these ideas. So I'll start with some that are things that I do a lot of. I do more with, I would say, concepts, values, community building is another one that I tend to do a lot of. So here's a few examples of things that I do, and I'm going to pull back the curtain and talk you through this. So, and you see that I have an Instagram link at the bottom. You can look at any of my social media platforms as like a case study after this if you want to. But here's a few that I wanted to pull out. So top left, you are gaining wisdom on this upward climb. Look, I'm mostly talking with small business owners, and I think you and I both know small business ownership is a roller coaster. It's not easy. And there are days that you just feel like the worst human on earth. And there are days that you feel like the best human on earth. And hopefully you have more of the best human on earth sorts of days. But we all have those dips as well. And so a value system of mine is encouragement. And it's how I try to talk to my clients. It's how I try to talk to people everywhere that I'm talking to them. So on social media, I'm going to talk in an encouraging way. And so a post like this is about sharing the value of encouragement with this specific audience. And what I've also found is that by doing posts like this from time to time, I have attracted people who like encouragement and who want to be encouraging as well. So sometimes I'll do a post like this and somebody else will comment in a way that's like, oh, I really needed to see this today. Or, they just are showing that they've had a hard day. And I found sometimes other people from my community will jump in and encourage them, because those are the great people that I've attracted to my page by being encouraging. So, this is something that has helped to feed the value system of my community, and helped to weed in the types of people that I want to work with. Now on the right here, very different type of post. So this is a one-liner from a blog that I wrote, Cross Marketing as a Content Pillar Unto Itself. You can see the title of the blog. You can read this post in, I don't know, a couple seconds. If you look at the description of the post, you're going to see that I give a little more information and a link to read the full blog back on my website, because I want to get the people to my website if they're interested in this. But you can read this. It didn't cost you any money at all to read this. It didn't cost you hardly any time. And yet you start to understand that what I do is marketing, right? So it's planting this concept that I'm a marketing resource and that I'm a marketing expert that you can come to for marketing advice. So this is the type of thing that I want to put out there. And I don't want to make you feel threatened by it in the process, right? I want you to feel like you can read this and you can engage with it or not, and you can move on. You don't have to buy something straight away. So this is kind of all part of the plan. And the bottom there, if I've been a guest on a podcast, for example, this one, this is a chance for me to start featuring that content. It shows the reputation, it shows the community building with that podcaster. It allows me to tag the podcaster, and it really starts to build a couple of those other goals as well. So I've pulled back the curtain on some of mine, but look, if you were to go to any of my social media accounts, you would see that there are some of those selling without selling buckets that I don't pull from. So I wanted to give you a couple of other examples on the things that I don't do very much of. One of them is sensory marketing. I don't do much with sensory marketing for my own business, but for some businesses, this could be a great thing to do. If you feel like your business would get people's attention by tapping into the touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste. Touch is a little bit more difficult, perhaps. Some of them might be a little more difficult, you would think, but I'm going to show you a couple of examples here that actually may challenge that idea for you a little bit. So here's one, Aston Martin. I like to show examples of companies that aren't marketing to me just to see what they're doing. And here we are, Aston Martin, with a roar of the engine. Vantage is in hot pursuit. Got a couple hashtags here. We've got these beautiful photos. And to me, this is really sensory, right? They've got the roar of the engine. I can hear it. Hot pursuit, you can feel it. Those images, the two of those images have a blurry background. So it's making me almost feel the speed. And then that bottom right picture, you can almost feel what it would be like to be sitting in that interior on a sunny day with the sun coming in through the windshield. So even with what they've shown you here, they've actually played with senses quite a lot. What they didn't do was say Aston Martin Vantage equals price tag. That would probably lead to sticker shock for a lot of people. That's not what they're trying to do here. What they're trying to do is make you want this car. If they make you want this car, if they make you salivate over this car, if they make you dream of owning this car, there will come a day when you're like, I'm doing it. I'm buying this car. For some people, that day won't be far away. For some people, it'll be far in the future, but they want you dreaming of this particular car so that this is like your aspirational purchase. Now, here's a very different one. It's presentation with me, so I thought I'd throw in some sweets. So here we go. And not just one, but two posts. Nestle Toll House. We got fudge. We got cookies. We got fudge and cookies. Say no more. So again, they're not saying to you cookie equals price tag. What they're saying here is what they're going to show me is they're going to show me this cookie on the bottom that's broken open. That one chocolate chip is kind of oozing onto the table. So I'm looking at this cookie. I'm thinking it's warm. It's fresh out of the oven. It's melty and chewy. It's soft. I want this cookie just because I'm looking at that one cookie at the bottom. And maybe it's the same for you, right? So they're probably not going to be as effective telling you to buy it as they would be just making you want to eat it. So that's the approach that they're taking here. And again, you'd think, how could you possibly conjure up smell and taste in a social media post? Well, they've done it. The best they can possibly do, they've done it here. So hopefully that's driving people to want to buy their product. Now, I'm going to show you also a couple examples of marketing on emotions. I don't tend to do a lot of that in my own marketing, so I want to make sure you have some workable examples here. And the words on this page can give you some ideas of examples of emotions you can tap into. Not a comprehensive list, but if you start thinking about what would be relevant for your audience, you can probably find ways to play with that. I often find that emotion, there's like a positive and a negative side of each of them. So, if you talk about fear, you could also talk about safety, feeling safe. You can, there's a flip side to everything, and your audience may be more attracted to one side than the other. The other thing I want to say before I show you the examples of this is that, for some types of products and services, emotions are a really obvious thing to tap into, but some of again, there are different personality types in the buying process. Some people are going to be more wooed by emotions than others. So for me, as an analytical buyer, if somebody's doing nothing but tapping into my emotions, they're probably making me more suspicious. But for other people who are emotional buyers, tapping into their emotions may be the only way you're going to sell to them. So know that within your audience, this one's got a little bit of an asterisk on it. And you have to sort of really test out these theories with your own audience to see what's working. But again, if your product or service potentially has that emotional hook, give it a shot and see if it's something that works for you to start tapping into it in your marketing. So let me show you a couple of examples. I'll give you one that's kind of on the nose, if you will, a little bit of a pun there. We've got Kleenex. There's comfort in knowing we're not alone. There can be strength in sharing our vulnerability. Share hashtag all the feelings you're feeling. So even though we're apart, we can feel together. This one I think was at the start of the pandemic, actually, is one of the ones that they did. A post like this, I mean, leans in very well to what their product is. If they're making you cry, they're making you grab for their product. So I guess they're trying to create the problem that they solve at the same time. But it makes a lot of sense. Kleenex, you're either going to be using them because you're sick, or you've got allergies, or you've got like a health thing going on. You're going to be using it because you're emotional. So tapping into the emotions certainly makes sense for a whole reason for using their product. But let me show you something a little different. And I think this one is really interesting. So this one's from the Sleep Lady. A little bit of text here. I'm going to read through it and just give you a feeling for what they're doing. So your baby, who got through the last sleep regression and was finally sleeping well day and night, is suddenly waking early from her naps and up all night. Okay, then on the right, we've got you're tired and she's tired. It's a 7-month sleep regression in full swing. Then they give you a link to learn more. So what are they tapping into here? The Sleep Lady is feeling like you are probably pretty frustrated. Maybe you're concerned about your baby, and also you're frustrated and you're tired and this is a lot. You might be overwhelmed. They're leaning into that. They're being relatable to that. If I'm reading this, I think the Sleep Lady gets it, right? And this is my situation. I think the Sleep Lady gets it. And going a step beyond that, I kind of figure the link that they've shared below is going to help me figure out a way to solve it. So if I connected to this graphic, if I connected to this copy, I'm now thinking, all right, I better click on this link because maybe the Sleep Lady has some insight for me on how to resolve this. That's the assumption that I'm going to be making. So a lot of really smart things in this post, yes, tapping into the emotion, and now getting people directly to their website, getting that link to the website, getting them off of social media to their website so you can discover everything this business has there. So these are some things that you can really start thinking about. Does emotion work for your business? And if it does, how would you start using it? So I wanted to give you a bit of a summary here for ideas for selling without selling that you could potentially tap into for the holidays. And look, you may very well be able to use concepts and values and philosophies here as well, but I wanted to put a quick one pager that you can look to later on for stories, senses, and emotions, because I think those are 3 areas that you could tap into during this time of year in a way that's potentially more seasonal, but very impactful for a holiday season. So stories, you could talk about traditions for you, for your business. You could talk about holiday experiences of your clients, holiday experiences you've had with your clients. You could talk about favorite business holiday memories. That could be something, whether this is a time of year where things get faster or slower. If things get really fast this time of year, there's probably a lot of cool stuff you could say about what's going on behind the scenes for your business. So a day in the holiday season life for your business could be a really fun way for people to start understanding what it looks like behind the scenes operationally for you to get to meet that holiday demand, and for you to make sure people are getting what they need for the holidays to have a good holiday season of their own. Senses, the holidays, I guess for all of us, we have different things that we appreciate during the holidays. It's not all the same, but yet there are certain tastes or flavors or scents or imagery or visuals that can be conjured up during this time that could be maybe not universal, but appreciated by a large portion of your audience. So that's something to consider. Touch, sounds, are there certain things that you may tap into during the holidays that you wouldn't at other times of year? And how does that relate back to your brand? Now, from an emotions standpoint, this can be a really complex time of year. And I think being able to put your finger on what your audience on the whole is feeling can be helpful to you. So from an emotions standpoint, are people feeling relief? They had a long year and this is their chance to unwind. Is it the most stressful time of year they could possibly have? Are they completely not able to think about anything else but dealing with, all the stuff they have to deal with for the holidays? Do they have the feeling of togetherness? Do they have the feeling of total loneliness? I mean, oh my goodness, what a completely polarized time it is for people depending on what their life experiences and who's in their life in that moment or who's not in their life at that moment. Is it relaxing? Is it busy? So I think there's all these things that if you understand what's going on for your audience, you can use language that really taps into it specifically. And if you're not sure, you could try doing a little bit of, some of each of these things and see what's resonating the most for people, because you can get that kind of feedback with social media marketing. So these are all some different ideas that you could potentially tap into for the holidays as you think about your campaigns, as you think about your on-ramps. And this is something that it's going to look a little different for every business. And again, for some of you, maybe you'll lean more into the concepts and the value systems and the philosophies than you will with these things. So make it match with your brand, make it match with the target market you're trying to reach. And hopefully with all of this, I just want to give you these tools so that you can use the tools you have that make sense for your purpose, for your specific target market. And if you have a different purpose or target market on on each platform that you're on, if you're on more than one, then use the tools that make sense for each one, specific to each of those locations. And again, my hope is that you take this idea, which is certainly relevant for social media marketing, but I believe it has relevance outside of that. So, where else could you use this selling without selling idea when you're marketing your business? What other channels do you have? Again, are you doing networking events? Do you have other events that are coming up? Do you have ways you engage with community that are not all online? Can you use it in email marketing that you do? So take this concept and think about, are there other places that you can use it and leverage it as well? So at the end of the day, I always want you thinking about how this material relates back to your business. So it's been a little while since I've thrown one of these questions to you. But again, if you're on with me live, feel free to answer this question live. If you're not, take a moment, literally stop the presentation and just think to yourself, what of these selling without selling ideas can I engage with in my marketing? Concepts, values, philosophies, stories, senses, emotions. You don't have to pick one. You could pick more than one. And this should be perfectly customized to your business. And you could, if you're on more than one platform, talking to different audiences, create a different list for each one. This is your chance to start building the ideas behind what your content needs to be, right? If you can start saying, oh, I'm going to play with stories, now you know that you need to create content that has stories in it. And it starts to narrow down the, maybe it helps you stay out of writer's block a little bit, because you already know going in, I need to approach this type of audience with this type of story, and the story starts to write itself. So, if you can start narrowing it down in this way, hopefully it helps you build those buckets of content that you're going to need to start creating later. So again, take that moment, just think, which of these things can I engage with my marketing, and make it specific to your business. So having said all that, I wanted to take a moment to look at one of the other goals. This is the last section that we'll get into here, but an important one, I feel, because social media, the word social is built right in. So we want to be having conversations on social media. So how do we create conversation? And this really ties into that community aspect in terms of the objectives that we're trying to reach. So when it comes to creating conversation, I'll start with a question to you right away, just to just to see where we are as a starting point. So does your social media strategy prioritize posting or engagement? And not having defined this for you yet, I just want you to have sort of a gut reaction to this. It's typically people will answer posting or engagement, or they'll give the split. It could be that you've kind of got like a 60-40 or a 50-50, or you can decide how you want to answer something like this. But this is really about getting a baseline of where you are to start before I share the rest of this content with you. And I'm being a little unfair because I haven't defined engagement for you here, but I still want you to take a moment and think, what do you think I mean? And evaluate yourself based on that for where you are at this particular moment. Again, that just gives us a baseline to see where we're going from here. And I'm asking this question for a reason, because ultimately on social media, I want to get people talking with you and about you. And, my hope, if you were trying to aggressively grow your audience, is that you'd spend more time engaging with people out there in the social media world than you would posting your own content. If I'm working with a client and I'm trying to help them grow their audience, I'm going to spend X amount of hours, or however much time doing posts in a given week, but I'm going to spend more time going out and having conversations on behalf of that business during the week. And if you're not trying to grow aggressively, maybe it's a little bit more of an even split. Maybe you're doing a little bit of both. If all you're looking for is brand awareness, and you don't really care about the community building or reputation piece, then maybe all you do is post. So really knowing what you're trying to go for is going to help drive you. But I believe that, because social media really shows you if people are engaging with that business or not, you want to look somewhat popular. You don't want to look like nobody's listening to you. So to get people to have conversations with you, creating conversation, building that engagement, this should be very much a priority in your social media marketing plan. Now, what do I mean by engagement? Because a lot of times people interpret this to mean if you post, let's say you do a Facebook post and somebody comments on your post. Okay, yeah, I respond to the people who comment on my posts. I wish I had more people commenting. These are the types of things that I hear from business owners that I talk to. Yes, I want you engaging back with the people who come to your posts to comment and to engage. I want you engaging with them. I don't want you ignoring them. But to me, that's a given. That's hopefully you're not ignoring the people that come to your page. That's a given. But we can go beyond that. We can be proactive in building our communities and building conversation off of our pages to bring those people back to our pages. That's what I'm talking about. So in that way, I would define engagement as saying, going out onto other people's accounts, to other people's conversations, to other people's following, where other conversations are happening, going to other businesses in your sphere, going to places where your target market is hanging out as your business, and then liking or reacting to people's comments and conversations. Comment marketing, that's a thing. You can be commenting on other people's posts, on other people's conversations, and not selling, but asking questions, listening, contributing insight, being, representing your brand. For me, maybe I'll be encouraging, maybe I'll compliment somebody, and, just showing up in their notifications over and over again. Some percentage of those people are going to say, who's this great person who's listening to me? And they'll click back and they'll discover your business as a result. And that's what we want to happen. We want that inbound marketing to happen. So it can also happen through sharing. A little bit of a caveat here, though. Don't just share anybody's content. It really does need to align with your brand and make sense for you to be sharing that content to your audience. So if you've got a page where all you're doing is sharing other people's stuff, it's like, well, what do you do? Exactly. So, use it sparingly as a tool to support your, businesses or influencers that are sending a message similar to what you want to send. And don't dilute your content to do it. Hashtags, on certain platforms, you can go to a hashtag and see who else is talking about that thing or what other conversations are happening. So that may give you an opportunity to easily find people who are having a conversation related to something that you do, and just get into the conversation and see if you can drive some people back to your own page. So this is the type of engagement, again, if you think proactively, where if you're doing this, you can start bringing people back so they can really feel like they're getting more communication from your business, and they're trusting you and knowing you before you ever try to tell them about what you do and sell them something. So I told you at the very beginning of this that I was going to show you a couple of examples of, if all you were doing was advertising, if that's how you were really building your leads, what happens if you're engaging with people versus if you're not engaging with people? What happens if you have that sieve versus if you have that glass for the water that you want to drink? Well, here's a couple examples. And, it's hard for me to find examples of companies engaging on other pages. So I'm going to show you examples of how they engage on their own page, just to help you get an idea. So I'm going to show you an example here of a company that I feel is creating more conversation. They're drinking out of a glass. And then on the next slide, I'll show you one that's ending conversations and sort of ignoring people a little bit more. And to me, that's more representative of trying to drink out of a sieve. So creating conversation. Here we've got an example from Starbucks. I actually didn't even show you the post here. And I know the writing is a little bit small, but I'm going to talk you through what I want you to see. So I didn't even show you the post because there's so much else I wanted you to see here. I believe that Starbucks probably advertised this post or boosted it in some way because, when I looked at the amount of engagement that they had on this post versus the other posts around it, it was wildly different. So I assume that they put some significant effort into money into advertising this post to get the kind of reach that they got. So you look at the numbers here, reactions, had about 3,800 reactions overall, 372 comments, 412 shares. Okay, here's what I want you to see. So every single person who wrote in, this is just a small snapshot of the comment section. It is by no means representative of the full comment section, but every single person who commented got a response from Starbucks. If the person commented back, Starbucks commented back. If they asked a question, Starbucks answered it. If they gave a compliment, Starbucks said thank you. If they made a complaint, Starbucks addressed it and gave them a way to submit feedback. They left no stone unturned in this comment section. So what does that mean? It means three things, really. So thing one that it means is that on almost any platform, the more you need to commit to make an action, probably the more that action weighs in the algorithm. So if somebody likes a post, it's not going to get as much reach as if they commented or shared. So shares tend to weigh more, I guess you could say, than comments. Comments tend to weigh more than likes on most platforms. Now, with that in mind, every time somebody's commenting and then Starbucks comments back and then they comment back, this is just going to get shown to more and more people over time. And so they're doing as much as they possibly can to build the momentum of the organic reach that they're getting in addition to whatever their post in addition to whatever advertised reach they're getting. That's one thing. Now, a second thing to consider here is that if you are any one of these people who's commented and you get a comment back, how does that make you feel? As somebody who is a consumer who's written into a big company's page or a small company's page, any company's page, if you get a response, how does that make you feel? Third thing, as people who are just spying on all this, right? I've just shown you clips of this. This is all publicly available information. So any of us can go to any company's page and see whether or not they are engaging with the people on their page. We can see that with our own two eyes. So, how does it make us feel to see that everybody who wrote in got a response? Now, also, we can see what they responded. So we start to get influenced by the voice of the brand that they responded. All of this is stuff that we add to whatever understanding we have of the brand, and it becomes part of our new understanding of the brand, right? So you're just constantly taking information that you're getting about a brand and you're turning it into what you think that brand is. And so we are able to do that. They're giving us a lot of fodder to do that here. And they're controlling that narrative for us as people who are looking on. Okay, so now I'm going to show you pretty much the opposite example. And this is not a company that I thought would be giving me the opposite example, but here we are. Hallmark. So again, this post, I believe, was advertised because when I looked at the other posts around it, there was nowhere near as many likes or reactions. So that really indicated to me that they had done something to push this out there in more volume. So this was from a previous Halloween, felt like it was, you know, a good seasonal one here. And what you're looking at here is pretty much the entirety of the comment section. So they had about 2,400 reactions overall on this post, 14 comments, 85 shares. If you think back on the Starbucks numbers, this is nowhere near the comments and the shares that they had, even though it's like 2/3 the number of reactions that they had. So what are we looking at here in the comments section? Well, there are people who commented, they didn't get a response. And I do want to point out that I had checked, none of these likes on the comments are from Hallmark. So they are not the people, they did not engage with the people who connected with them here. Whether somebody complained, whether somebody asked a question, whether somebody complimented them, they still didn't show up. I even looking at that first comment, your prices are way too high. Somebody else who isn't Hallmark jumped in and said they do sell 99-cent cards. What a great sales opportunity that could have been for them. You know, they could have had their own positive spin there and said, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, but we do have a whole 99-cent card section. Here's a link directly to it. And they could have gotten that person back to their website as well as any other person who visited their page and saw this conversation happening. So 3 things, right? First of all, if the comments and the shares are what's going to help really drive more reach for them, they weren't really doing anything to try to stoke that organically. They were just letting the advertising dollars work for themselves. And, you know, in terms of getting more organic reach, they weren't proactively trying to keep coming up in notifications for people. So that's one thing, which is why you're going to see a smaller number of comments and shares on something like this, because they weren't trying to stoke it. And that probably means they haven't tried to stoke it over time either. So people perhaps know not to comment if they don't want a response. So that's something to consider. Now, with those other 2 pieces, if you're somebody who commented but didn't get a response, how does that make you feel? And if you're us looking at this and you start to see, okay, for everything that I know about Hallmark, I'm going to add to that the fact that I'm looking at this and they don't respond to the people who are, you know, on their page. It's not everything you know about the brand. It just adds to your overall understanding of it. So, you know, it starts to really show you, you know, again, and this is the example of responding to people who comment on your own page. But if you can imagine, you know, how much more a company could get if they also, in addition to responding to people on their own page, what if you were going out and bringing people back to your page? You could probably be getting even more traction along the way, and you could be getting people into the habit of knowing that they can have a conversation with you on your posts. So this is just something to factor in when you think about building the conversation and how that helps you expand your reach over time. And at the end of the day, social media only works for us if people are seeing our content. Not a lot of people are going to bookmark your pages and come visit them every day to see if you've got a new post. So you need to make sure that whatever platform you're on, if you're on YouTube or if you're on Twitter, if you're on Snapchat, whatever you're on, you know, that you're really getting people in the habit of seeing your content because you're doing as much as you can to push it out there organically. So having said all that, one more thing that I wanted to point out, and I've sort of given you hints at this at different points of this presentation, but where are you steering these conversations? You don't really want conversations to live and die on social media because you don't own those platforms. So, you know, how can you get people to another location? How can you get those leads? How can you get people into a one-to-one conversation with you that you can track and turn into a sale, you know, that you can get it into your sales pipeline and really start addressing those people's questions. And a big question that I have for you is what happens if the platform disappears? You know, if a platform changes their terms and conditions, we've certainly seen that happen many, many times, right? You can't control that. If a platform gets sold to another company, if your audience decides they don't want to be there anymore, if it's glitchy for a day, what was it? A few weeks ago, we had Facebook, Instagram, and something else go down for like half a day. And anybody who was looking to do something that day on those platforms and needed to reach their audience, but only had those channels, they were out of luck because those platforms weren't an option. So, you know, what happens if your access or your customers' access to the platform disappears? Do you just lose all of those contacts that you made? What a risky place to be in for your business. So we really want to have the diversification of ways we can reach the people in our audience and to get more control over being able to communicate with those contacts. So something that I strongly recommend for you, and this is something that you can see if you go to really any of the social media platforms that I use. This is a technique that I use. But ideally, every post you have is linking people back in some way to a website or a sign-up form or a blog or something to get people to another location. And if the content itself doesn't do that, a sneaky way that I have of doing a selling without selling post, but then also getting them to another location. Like let's say, for example, I do an encouragement post. I'm going to do the picture, I'm going to do the encouraging phrase, but then at the bottom of it, just like you'd seen in the email, I'll have a little line break and I'll make a little call to action. You know, oh, you want to learn more about how to market your business on a budget? Check out my free ebook and I'll get somebody over to my ebook sign up page. Even though the post they read was about an encouraging phrase, the picture was about something encouraging, the thing they're reacting to was encouragement. But there's just this almost subliminal, but not quite subliminal. It's there. It's on all my posts, just getting people to the website. And that's something that you can do that not only gives people a place to go, hopefully gives them something to sign up for if you can do that, but it just starts to get people to explore the next step. And I've even seen big companies, for example, there was a toy company that I saw that spent a whole post talking about a toy and never gave people a link to where to buy it. So like the number of actions somebody needs to take action on the thing you're trying to sell is probably higher than the number of people who would actually want to do that. It was like, if you click here and then there and then there and then there, now you can land on the website and stumble across this product somewhere if you can find it. But if you could just make it a little easier for people to get to your website, more people will do it. So if you're selling something, definitely give them a link. If you're giving them a blog, definitely give them a link. But even if you're not doing that, if you're doing a selling without selling post, still get them to your website, get them somewhere that you can maintain that conversation. So having said all that, I just want to sort of wrap it up with this idea that social media and the holidays are ultimately part of the relationship building journey. The holiday campaign is going to be a short-term campaign, but I hope that you see how you can embed that within a longer-term social media marketing strategy and have it all work seamlessly together. You know, reach them for the holidays and show that you're going to continue reaching them beyond that, and you'll probably get a lot more out of the social media marketing that you're doing. So I want to leave a little bit of time for questions and for the SBDC folks to be able to share anything they want to share too. So let me just sort of wrap up. Here's what we talked about. If you have a question and you're on with me live, you're welcome to put it into the chat and I'm happy to address it at the end here. We talked about why are you social media marketing? That was that purpose piece. Then we talked about matching your purpose with the target market. Then we focused on two of those objectives. We looked at showcasing your brand and we looked at creating conversation and how all of that really lines up into a good social media marketing strategy. Quick reminder, we've got 2 more webinars coming up in this series. One tomorrow, one the next day. And I want you to note the different times on this. Tomorrow's is the one that's a different timing for us. So 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central. We'll talk about boosting holiday sales with partnership marketing. Really fun topic. and one where you can really think about how you're going to leverage alliances with other businesses during this time and every time, really. Then on Thursday, we're going to talk about how to create a profitable marketing strategy. And that one is my favorite one to present on because it's really about how do you build a comprehensive marketing strategy to get people not just hearing about your business, but becoming your customers. And how do you get more people into your sales pipeline, get more referrals, get more sales along the way? So that'll be a really good one for anybody who's looking to build their marketing strategy going into the year ahead as well. So just a quick reminder, there's a landing page link on the very last slide here that I've thrown a lot of resources onto. In addition to the slide deck, I've got a couple of exercises, one on creating a signature line for your business, and then one on locating your own target markets on social media. A lot of people have this question, so I wanted to give you a resource that you could use to start doing that research for yourself. And then I've got several different blogs that I've loaded onto that page as well, talking about different aspects of social media, and addressing some of the frequently asked questions that I get on this area. So here it is. We can take questions here, but that top link is that link to the landing page on my website that has all of those resources loaded onto it. And that link below it is the link for the North Central Texas SBDC. If you're interested to book a session or work with one of the advisors, that's definitely a place you'll want to go. And if any questions do come in, I'm happy to answer those now. But in addition to that, I wanted to throw this back over to Brett just to see if he had anything he wanted to say about the SBDC.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you, Melissa. Absolutely. We have tons of questions, I'm sure. If you do have questions, please, real quick, go ahead and put them in so we can follow up real quick with your questions. She's been inspiring today. And if you have more questions, just to remind you, if you're rewatching this as a rerun, or you've come back to watch it again, possibly, and it's created other questions in your mind as you've been thinking about your own marketing campaigns and social media, please feel free to reach out to us at the SBDC, and we'll be happy to get those questions to Melissa and try to get them answered for you, or through one of our business advisors and schedule a meeting there. So that's something I want to do. Let's go with a couple of these questions real quick. And this is one of them. Would you say, after all of this, Melissa, there's tons and tons of, oh my gosh, got to respond, got to do this, got to do that. Oh, don't forget. And make sure that you're engaging and creating a community. Being part of that community means paying attention. And a lot of small business owners may not feel like they have a lot of time to do that. And some of the ones that I've been advising, I get asked this question a lot. Should I hire somebody specifically for that? And should they be full-time, or what? What do you recommend as a professional?
I'm going to answer this in a couple ways. It's such a good question. And the first thing that I'm going to do is, and I don't mean this to be off-putting for anybody, but I mean it to be realistic. If you are in a position where you have no time to give and nobody you can bring onto your team to be able to do this kind of work on social media, maybe social media isn't the right place to market your business, right? So if you're going to sit here and tell me I can post once every 2 weeks, and then I'm going to schedule it, and I'm going to walk away, and I'm not going to be there for any conversations, you are really not able to take advantage of what social media is there for. It's meant to be social, right? So if that's what you have to give, maybe what we're looking at is a different marketing strategy. Maybe you do a blog to get your content out there, and a newsletter to reach your audience on an infrequent basis. Maybe you're building leads by going to a networking event once a month, where the time that you're spending is more match with the platform that you're on. So that's something I want to say, because sometimes people push back and they're like, I don't have time to give, nor do I have time to hire somebody. And it's like, well, social media is meant to be social. So if you're not prepared to do that, you're probably driving people away from your business and making them feel that you're unpopular. So now, to take it to your question, should you hire somebody? If you really don't feel like you have the bandwidth to be able to be engaging with people on social media, then you can hire somebody. You could get a volunteer, you could get an intern. There's a lot of ways to resource your team, and it doesn't all have to be paid. It doesn't necessarily have to be full-time. I think people can cover a lot of ground in a very, very limited part-time position. If somebody were to spend 15 to 20 hours a month on social media, you could probably get a lot more done than you would have, if you didn't have that person at all. So I think having a good strategy, having a cohesive plan for how you'll post will help you be more efficient there. And engaging is just about taking the time to do it. So it was a great question. And I get that kind of question a lot. And I'm glad we were able to address it here.
Thank you. And just a couple more real quick. You did mention about groups and being involved and everything on Facebook. And somebody's asking, is there value in being a part of Facebook groups, and how many do you recommend business join? Is there a limit, or just be a part of it all?
I mean, the limits are a very, very high number. So it's unlikely that most people would reach those numbers along the way. I think quality is important more so than quantity, right? So I think if you're in one group that has great conversations happening and you're really engaged there, you're probably going to get more from it. But if you can diversify a little bit, it's nice to put your eggs not all in one basket. So is there a value of being part of Facebook groups? Well, first of all, is there a value to your business being on Facebook? And then if so, is there a group that really has your target market or really has other businesses that you can link up with? And how can you be very active in that group? And is that activity rewarded? Are there other conversations happening there? So I think more so than give you a numerical amount here, if you just think about, can you get a certain number of conversations going a week or a month? Maybe aim for that, and however many groups or conversations get you there, or pages get you there, then that's probably what you target.
Thank you. And last question before I throw it back to you for any final comments, and then I will come back and give us a schedule of events coming up. And before I close the meeting, but the last question is, how often should a business owner post on social media? And we get asked this a lot, believe it or not, to be effective.
Good question. I think, different platforms work a little differently. Like something like Twitter, you're probably going to end up doing a higher volume. It's really short bites. They don't last very long. Instagram tends to be a little less frequent, perhaps. Facebook, if you can post as much as once a day, during the week, that's awesome. If you can do a few times a week, that's great. If you do a couple times a week, that's great. Once you start getting to if you're at once a week or once every other week, now we're starting to get into a point where it's like, are you spending the time engaging there? Are you really getting the most from it that you possibly can? So that's something that I want everybody to consider, of just making sure, is this the right place for me to be? Because usually posting once every other week or so starts to show up in the engagement too. So I would start to steer you in that direction. But I will say that if you are engaging, it doesn't really matter when you post or how you post or when you post, because you're going to keep getting people back to your page. So that is something that, when people ask me what time of day, if you're engaging actively and driving people back to your page, they're going to keep showing up regardless of what time of day you posted. And so it's going to throw off your algorithms a little bit.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, you've answered a lot of the questions, and I know there's going to be more. So thank you for being available. And I'll let you, did you have some final closing comments? It sounded like you wanted to do questions and come back for something, or is that no?
No, I just thank you all for joining today. And, I hope this gives people some things to think about. We started with the most tactical of the three presentations. And, as we expand from here, you're going to get some different ideas on how to loop marketing for the holidays together to really make it work for your strategy. So thanks everybody for joining today. And again, thank you to the SBDC for hosting.
Our pleasure to have you, for sure. I'm going to share my screen real quick, as we have some upcoming events I want everybody to know about. So speaking of that, tomorrow's a double. Before I even tell you about this, I want to tell everybody there's a survey coming at you right after the seminar here, or the webinar. We always go back to you for feedback to make sure that you're getting the type of content that you need as a small business owner or an entrepreneur, and help you get even further training. So please feel free to fill that out. It'll take 2 minutes, and it gives us great feedback to continue to give you great education as you work on your own businesses. So with that said, tomorrow, double hitter. Oh my goodness. Lorna Kibbe coming back with slides and other visuals, helping you with your presentations. And of course, Melissa Forciat is coming back for the next 2 days. So don't miss the follow-ups from this. On the 27th and 28th, tomorrow it'll be boosting your holiday sales. And then 28 will be following up with creating a marketing strategy. Now, that tells me a whole lot. We're not just talking about doing some marketing. We're talking about making a chess game of it and winning the game. So when you're creating the strategy, make sure that you attend that on the 28th. That's this week. It's going to be a full packed week of learning. So if you can take time out, or if you know a friend that wants to would probably use these services as well, invite them to come to the webinar and sign up for it. We'll be happy to have them on board. We also have a financial negotiations workshop for minority women-owned business, minority and women-owned businesses by Rebecca Schultz on the 8th of November and the 9th of November. How to attract online shoppers during the holiday season. As you can tell, we're focusing on the holidays already because this is the time to really get out there and plan your attack for the holiday season. November 10th, followed up with telling stories, everything you need to know. And that'll be with Lorna Kibbe. If you want to know more about all of these and many other ways to educate yourselves as business owners, stop by the sbdc.nctc.edu, which is our website, and you can get more information about it and sign up for actual one-on-one sessions with our business advisors. We'll be happy to make sessions with you and help you grow your business. Don't forget, we're here to help you. And where would we be without the SBA, the state of Texas, North Texas, SBDC regional office, and of course, North Central Texas College. We look forward to having all of you the rest of the week and continued education for all of the business owners out there. This will conclude today's webinar. Thank you and have an outstanding week.